The Pac-12 this season has been better than both the SEC and the Big Ten. Over the last couple of years in college football, the SEC and the Big Ten have been undoubtedly the best conferences in the whole entire sport. But this season, though, the Pac-12 in their dying season, their last breath, has become the top conference in college football this season. And you look at the quarterbacks in this conference: Bo Nix, Micheal Penix, Cam Rising, Caleb Williams, Sheduer Sanders, DJ Uyunglele, Cameron Ward at Washington State. The list just continues to go on and on and on. It is no surprise why the Pac-12 is the best conference in college football at this moment. You see, yeah, this conference has kind of taken a little bit of some tough losses to the SEC. Cal lost to Auburn. You look at the fact that Utah beat Florida. That was an impressive win. But outside of that, when Oregon played Georgia last year, it was a bloodshed. So it's like, yeah, you can say this conference has taken a couple of losses to the SEC. Arizona State lost to Mississippi State not too long ago. But those are the bottom of the barrel teams in this conference. When you look at the Pac-12 this season as a whole, this is one of the deepest, if not the deepest conference in college football. You see, when people talk about the SEC, all you really have is Alabama and Georgia. And this season, in particular, you really just have Georgia because Alabama, they struggled against USF. They don't have a quarterback. Alabama probably could lose 2 or 3 games this season. You got LSU. They're a good school. They're one of the best teams in college football. They're up there. But outside of Georgia, Alabama, and LSU, I don't think that the SEC is all that deep as what it used to be in the past. Arkansas just lost to BYU. I don't think BYU is going to be that good this year, despite the fact that they're 3-0. You got Kentucky, Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee, just all bottled up together in the middle of the SEC East. Nobody can really challenge Georgia. Outside of Georgia, Alabama, and LSU, there's not too many teams in this conference that I think will be able to beat a lot of teams in the Pac-12. I think outside of the 3 schools I just mentioned, Oregon, Washington, USC, I would like them to beat the other teams in this conference. I would take Washington and Oregon over Tennessee, Florida. I mean, you look at Mississippi State, they nearly lost to Arizona, and they had several turnovers that they forced in that game, and even then, the game was still fairly close. Ole Miss, they played Tulane. Yeah, they did cover, and they did beat Tulane by a pretty comfortable margin. I mean, their defense was getting shredded by Tulane in the first half, and Tulane was down their starting quarterback for that game. The SEC is not as good this season as what it has been in the past. Now, the Big Ten, bruh, I've been saying this for years. The Big Ten is the most overrated conference in college football. People talk about the top heavyweights in the SEC. Bruh, you can't get mad at the SEC for just having Alabama, Georgia, and LSU when there's only 3 teams that run the Big Ten: Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Outside of those 3 schools, who else does the Big Ten have that would be able to compete in the Pac-12 this year? You think that Iowa would win anything in the Pac-12 with that offense? Good luck. They got a great defense, but I don't think they got an offense. Maryland, okay, they could be a little interesting in the Big Ten. Wisconsin, they already lost to a Pac-12 school. They lost to Washington State. Illinois, they're not good. Purdue is not good. Like, I can name way more bad teams in the Big Ten than I can name mid to okay teams and great teams in the Big Ten. There's way more bad teams in the Big Ten than there are great teams. When you're looking at a conference from top to bottom in terms of teams that can be championship contenders all the way to teams that probably are going to be fighting for bowl eligibility, this is the deepest conference in college football this year. We know about how Washington, USC, and Oregon are the three primary frontrunners to not just be able to win this conference, but also being able to potentially make it into the college football playoffs and win a national championship. You got Utah, who also is in that conversation, but I don't think they are ever going to reach a point where they're going to be a championship contender. Not until the playoffs expands to 12 teams like it will next year. Then you got your Colorados, your UCLA's, teams that nobody really expected to be as good as what they are at this moment. Dante Moore is balling out. Sheduer Sanders has been arguably the best quarterback in college football outside of Caleb Williams. You got Washington State, Oregon State. There's just so much meat in this conference. It's like when you look at the SEC, it's like after the first three teams, it's like it's everybody else. But you look at the Pac-12, it's not just led by just three great teams. Everybody in this conference is a quality team. The majority of teams in the Pac-12 would have their way against the SEC this year and the Big Ten. If you don't think the Pac-12 is the best conference in college football this year, then I don't really know what to tell you other than you may need to get your eyes checked and you may just be a little bit biased. The Pac-12, when you look at their seventh team or the team that's going to be in seventh place in this conference compared to the team that's going to finish in seventh place in the SEC, I think that their seventh place team could potentially beat the seventh place team in the SEC. People think just because the SEC normally has really good teams, they have great teams and they're the best conference every single year. That's not the case this year. USF was hanging around with Alabama. Alabama lost to Texas. The SEC is not the juggernaut this season that it used to be in the past. The SEC looks very wide open outside of Georgia. Georgia's the only guarantee in the SEC. Outside of that, we don't know who the hell could be in Atlanta come the SEC championship. You look at the Pac-12, I mean, the Pac-12 is wide open, but it's not because teams are having down years. It's because a lot of these programs are having breakthrough seasons. I mean, Oregon State came off their first 10-win season in years. You're looking at a Washington team that looks as good as any other team in college football. I think Washington, the way they've been playing right now, they could beat Georgia. USC, they could compete with Georgia. It's like a lot of people overlook the Pac-12 because of the reputation that this conference has garnered over the last couple of years. You know, a lot of these teams tend to be a little bit more finesse. They're not all that tough up front. Well, this season, the Pac-12 and their dying breath, they're making a statement in college football. They're telling you that, hey, even though we're about to be irrelevant come the end of this season, we're going to go out with a bang, and you're going to remember the Pac-12 for the rest of your life after the end of the 2023 college football season, because I really believe that one of these teams is going to make it into the playoffs, and they're possibly going to be able to make it to the national championship. This is the best conference in college football. You got so many good teams. Washington State, Colorado, Utah, UCLA. I mean, this conference has so much depth. No conference in college football has the depth and quality of teams that the Pac-12 has this year. And the main reason for that is because a lot of these programs have really good quarterbacks. Hell, even the quarterbacks that you don't really know that much about, like Cam Ward at Washington State, if you watch Cameron Ward and you watch some highlights and you watch some film on him, you mean to tell me that you don't think right now he would be the best quarterback in the Big Ten or the Pac-12? Because he would be, in my opinion. DJ Uiagalelei, cast out by Clemson, goes to Oregon State, and he's balling out right now in Corvallis. Bo Nix wasn't that great at Auburn, goes to Oregon, resurrects his career. Micheal Penix didn't really do much outside of one season at Indiana, transfers with Kalen DeBoer at Washington, and he's now one of the best quarterbacks in college football and a Heisman frontrunner, in my opinion. The SEC, with the lack of quality quarterback play that they have this year, it's really hurt the play of that conference. The Big Ten, I mean, they've always really just been a conference that's only really been three teams, and then it's been everybody else. You may have a team like Wisconsin from the West win 10 games and they could be really good, but outside of Wisconsin on their best years, when they win 10 games, that's really it. The Pac-12, this is college football's deepest and most talented conference this year. The quarterbacks are really good, but the overall teams are really good as well. I think the Pac-12, they're going to be the best conference that college football fans have watched all season by the time the season concludes. I don't think the SEC is good this year. There's a lot of poor play in the SEC. Yeah, you do have Ole Miss and a couple of teams like Missouri who are surprising, but you also have some teams that don't look as good as what many people thought they would be, such as Tennessee. Tennessee very well could be a team that only wins 8-9 games this year. They could definitely crash back down to earth. South Carolina, I mean, their season hasn't really gotten out to a great start. They got whooped by UNC, their rival who plays in the ACC. Like, it just hasn't been a good season for the SEC and the Big Ten. I mean, the Big Ten has always been overrated to me. You've had a couple of good schools that come out of nowhere every once in a while, like that Michigan State team with Mel Tucker that year when they went all the way to the Peach Bowl. I mean, but outside of that, man, the Big Ten is really a 3-team race every single season. Even when they get rid of divisions and whatnot, it's still going to be a 3-team conference. So I think that the Pac-12, even though this is the last year that it's probably going to exist, has made a really strong statement to the other power conferences in college football that right now the Pac-12 is the main attraction to watching college football. Honestly, like some of the best games that we're going to see this season are going to be played in the Pac-12 this season. Like, I hope a lot of you guys like Pac-12 After Dark. I hope a lot of you guys are up after 10 p.m. because that's where you're going to find some of the best action in the nation this year.